Let's have some conversation around that which you saw before that name slide with our guest, as you can see, among other issues. Dr. Austin Tam George is an alumnus of the Harvard Kennedy School of Government. He's also a former Commissioner for Information in Rivers State. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thanks for inviting me.
But before we continue, I'd like you to listen to this from the governor of Rivers State.
For the entire state, it's important for us to note that we need this victory to consolidate on the purpose of governance. We have had a few distractions here and there, and the good news that came to us this morning is a refreshing strength that will ginger us to continue the work of governance. I want to commend the President for his fatherly role on every issues that concern our state. Not just the crisis, but also this particular litigation. It will also be unfair for me not to appreciate the minister, my Oga. I want to say thank you for all their support. And I want everybody to realize that Rivers State will have a dream of making it a highly competitive state.
Governor Fubara of Rivers State there, what do you make of that?
No, I think he captured the sentiment out there very, very correctly. You know, the litigations are over now. He needs to focus, and I think that the whole of Rivers State, and in fact, Nigerians need to support him to make sure that his agenda, which is very robust, I've seen the budget that was passed, you know, very robust vision that he has for the state. You know, now that the litigations are over, the onus is on everyone to support the government to make sure that, you know, Rivers State, you know, is now going to be in the headlines only for development, for progress, for creation of jobs, you know, and to move the state in a direction that is different from where we are now.
Well, let's speak on Rivers a little. Quite a number of contentions and contestations before this Supreme Court judgment, even before the elections. Do you see this judgment or the comments of the governor assuaging, you know, all frayed nerves?
I think so. I mean, you know, he has the mandate. He's been confirmed by the Supreme Court. He's been, you know, I know him very, very personally. You know, when I was in government as Commissioner for Information, he worked in the government house as Director of Finance. He's a very, very committed gentleman, very patriotic, and has a clear vision about what he wants to do for the state. I think that, as he said, you know, there had been some distractions, you know, before now, but ultimately, you know, the Supreme Court has now entered a judgment. And what this means is he's got total legitimacy to pursue an agenda for development of the state. Rivers State since 1950, you know, since 1958, you know, has been the source of, you know, economic growth for the country. You know, when, you know, oil was discovered in commercial quantities. When eventually the state was created in 1967, it became clear that Rivers State will continue to serve as the economic base of the country. So this is a very pivotal state, and the governor, from what I've seen, appears to have the commitment to drive the state in a different direction. I think we all now need to converge around him to make sure he brings development to our people on a sector-by-sector basis, and to support him.
Listening to the governorship candidate of the APC also speaking and saying he wishes the governor well and all of that, what overtures should be made by the governor or from the government? What kind of body language do you expect from the government of the state so that everyone can actually come on board and support these lofty ideals that you talk about?
No, Toye Cole is a very brilliant man. I know him as well personally. He is not the kind of person that will not be able to work with the governor. What we now need to do is to see that, whatever competing visions that they have concerning how the state should move forward, this is the time, for them to come together to say, okay, how can we, galvanize our people? How can we contribute ideas on a sector by sector basis to see how we can drive development in the state? I have had discussions with Tony Cole, informally on several occasions, and I've been very impressed, with his own ideas about how the state should be redirected. And I think that there is no much difference between his own vision and that of the governor. And more importantly, the governor has struck a very good note of conciliation by saying, look, I don't know it all. I'm very available for, different ideas to come to the table. And I think this is the convergent point now for everyone to work together to see how we can move the state in a different direction. We have one of the highest unemployment rates in the country. There is no reason why we should suffer the kind of unemployment crisis that we have in Rivers State. We have a lot of children out of school over the past 8 years. This is the time, for the government to work together. And I've seen the budget, that was proposed by and now signed into law by the governor. Very massive development is coming to Rivers State. And so my appeal as someone who has been in the State Executive Council and someone who has a stake in what is happening in the state is for everyone to converge around the governor to make sure that on a sector by sector basis we're able to deliver service to our people, because the purpose of government is not endless distractions and litigations. The purpose of government is to drive development to the doorstep of our people and change their material circumstances.
Twice you have mentioned the budget, and how about what do you make of the contestations around that one? We'll go to other states, which the Supreme Court, decided on. But what's your take on the contestations around the budget? When the members of the House are asking for a representation by the governor. Because
I understand that there are all kinds of litigations even on the budget. I don't want to comment on that, because the matters are in court. But what is clear, I think, to everyone is that, at the time the governor presented the budget, he presented it to a legally recognized, body of lawmakers. And so it's been already signed and gazetted, and it's now the basis for government intervention in the lives of our people. So my suggestion would be for everyone to converge around this and to try to drive development on the basis of the vision, that the governor has articulated.
Well, let's see whether or not the members of the House will listen to you and actually pull the case out of court. But to the other cases that have been decided by the Supreme Court, you spoke about Rivers State having one of the highest unemployment figures. At the last count, NBS believes that's the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics believes that Sokoto has the largest population of multidimensionally poor people in Nigeria. How do you see this decision of the Supreme Court validating that the election of the governor, helping with that?
No, I think all governors, in one of my earlier appearances on this show, I always mentioned that, all the 200 million or so Nigerians are disaggregated in different states. So sometimes we give disproportionate attention to the federal government, forgetting that the state governors also have very important roles to play in terms of alleviating poverty, pulling our people, into productive activities. The state governors, wherever they may be located, whether it's in Rivers State, whether it's in Sokoto, they have very serious responsibilities. They have clear budgets, they have action plans. What they need to do is to make sure they galvanize the very best. And when I mean the best, some of the people in some of these states may not even be career politicians. They may be experts, development experts. They may be all kinds of technical. They have all kinds of technical expertise. Once we are talking about governance, what this means is you need to broaden the scope, bring all kinds of people, including even Nigerians who are not necessarily politicians, to help you to set the agenda, to drive development, to to the people. So the tendency to always consider, governance as just an arena for politicians is wrong, because then you limit the pool of wisdom from which you can draw. So what I am suggesting is that open the space, bring as many people as possible who have something to offer in terms of development, and make sure that you are tapping from the genius of your own people, to drive development. So whether it is in Sokoto or in Cross Rivers or in Bayelsa or in Rivers State or anywhere across the country, let us make sure, that we fight multidimensional poverty through inclusive governance, which means bringing as many people as possible. And you talked about communication earlier in your program. The communication chain ought to be that of the people talking to the government, and the government also talking to the people, not just the government communicating what it wants to do, but there has to be this symbiosis. There has to be this needs assessment. What exactly do the people need on the ground? So that by the time you have this kind of, feedback mechanism between the people and the government, you narrow the gap of misunderstanding, and then you go closer and closer to the needs of the people. And I think that this is the time when development ought to come to the people. Politics is done now. We need to drive development quickly.
Is politics really done? Because a number of states in some parts of the country, we still have situations where one politician or the other is only reacting and not responding to the issues that are raised by the state government or the other way around. In various parts of the country, including in Taraba, Rivers, and Sokoto, where decisions have been made, and several other states that have been previously decided, we'll still find situations where the opposition parties in those states are only looking out for one thing. What is the state government not doing right? How do we reverse that trend to make it, to get to the point where, as you said, everyone in the city, in the state, take ownership of the state, not just because we are not in power, but because this is our state and we must make it better.
If opposition politicians, are part of a larger process, they are part of a larger mechanism for holding those who actually exercise power to account, then that's good. I mean, that's what opposition politics is about. But what I'm advising against is this toxicity, that we found, that characterize our politics, this tendency towards bellicosity of politics, that removes attention from the real issues that concern the development of our people. So, there's a fundamental difference with that. If opposition politicians are holding the government to account, they have an alternative vision, they are making sure that at every point in time, government is responsible for the development of society. That itself is a very important role. But what I am advising against is a situation where politics continues to be belligerent, continues to be toxic, continues to be, violence based. We've tried that for so many decades, and it hasn't worked. So what I'm suggesting is we need to change direction. We need to bring the issues that materially affect the people back, into the discussion, and say, how can we make sure that we reverse the trend where we have the largest number of children out of school? How can we make sure we run a more inclusive educational system? How can we make sure that we think beyond certification and credentialism to make sure that we rethink our educational system to emphasize skill acquisition, such that not only are people able to create jobs for themselves, they themselves have higher employability by the time they leave university. How can we make sure that governance itself means delivering service to our people? That is what I am concerned with, and that was what in the first place drove me into government eventually, in the course of my own career. So the most important thing that should animate politicians should be, how can we bring development to our people? Opposition politicians have a role to play to make sure that they monitor the activities of government and suggest ways, by which government activities can be better. But we should make sure we minimize toxicity in our politics.
Suggest ways. That's one of the things that we hardly tend to get these days. But before we go to other issues, how significant or striking is it for you that in all of the Supreme Court decisions, not one of them did we have a situation where the court overturned the decision overturned an election of a governor. In this particular space, we've had previously where the governor is removed from office by the Supreme Court and maybe a rerun or someone else is declared governor. In all of the cases for this election, not one. How significant is that for you?
Well, you know, we already know that there is this tendency to suspect, you know, the believability, the transparency of our electoral process. Once elections are held, my own personal preference, Ayo, is that leaders in this country should be chosen right there at the polls. The fact that electoral outcomes are litigated from the tribunal to appeal to the Supreme Court is not a good sign, Ayo. It's not a good sign. Now we have a situation where, you know, a collection of unelected judges up to the Supreme Court will have to decide who should be governor, will decide who should be president. You know, I've said it many times in all my career that the people should choose their leaders right there at the polls. And what is demands of the electoral umpire is that the system should be manifestly transparent, such that, you know, the results are acceptable right there at the polls, so that we don't go through this toxic process of litigations that make no sense.
Is it really that, or incursions? Because some people, for instance, you heard the governor of Rivers State saying he was thanking the president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, not just for what the crisis that he intervened in, but even for this decision. And almost every governor that has been validated keeps saying the same thing, thanking the president for not interfering. And that suggests to anyone, then some would probably say, okay, maybe previous president interfered in the affairs of the judiciary, but this president is saying, nope, I'm not going to interfere, and the politicians are thanking him for not interfering. So, is that any kind of sign to you?
Look, you know, I prefer to just look towards the ideal. For instance, you know, I lived for such a long time in South Africa in the course of my career, and I took time to monitor the electoral process in South Africa. At no time, did outcomes of elections become such a contentious issue in the courts to the point where, you know, people had to thank the president or thank anyone else, because the system, the electoral process, was always so transparent that people who lost knew that they lost fairly, and those who won knew that they won fairly.
Are you saying that our own process is not as transparent?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. What I'm saying is that the electoral process in this country needs to be completely rethought. We need to make sure we bring greater transparency and acceptability to our process in such a way that the outcome will be so convincing and so manifestly transparent that those who lose will know that, look, I did my best, and I can see very clearly that I lost fairly, and then there will be no need for litigation. My sense is that those who go into litigation do so because they have very great doubt concerning the transparency of the electoral process. And the point I'm making is that we should be aiming towards the ideal where the electoral process is so transparent and acceptable that once the people cast their votes, everybody believes that, look, I think this has been a fair process, and there's no need for litigation. Okay. Don't forget, Ayo, that, you know, in the final analysis, these litigations are extremely expensive. You know, by the time you move from up to the Supreme Court, they are very expensive. And my suggestion is that if we bring greater transparency and accountability and acceptability to our own electoral process, there will be lesser and lesser need for people to go through such an extensive, you know, and time-wasting litigation process.
Well, incidentally, Plateau State is one of those states which the Supreme Court decided on, validating the election of the Governor Muftwang. And that was before this recent one. It's also in the same Plateau State that we've had this crisis that's repeated a little too frequently these days. What do you make of all of the back and forth? The headlines today is filled with lots of stories on Plateau State. The DHQ, that's the Defense Headquarters, also making its own side known about that particular thing, saying, for instance, that they have deployed special forces in trouble spots, and they are saying that they are going to destroy the cancer of terrorism and all of that, especially concerning the Plateau killings. And the same military had told us through one of their officials, senior officials, that this is a case that's been on for about 10 years or more. What do you make of all of this?
You know, the death of every Nigerian within the borders of this country concerns me, and it should concern everyone. You know, the killings have gone on unabated. You know, it's been going on for such a long time, and now we see that even the audacity of the criminals, these terrorists, you know, appears to be increasing. What that requires us to do is that we need to think again about, you know, the security structure that we have in place. I would have thought that, you know, we need maybe to place an emphasis on intelligence gathering. We need to make sure that we deploy our military resources, you know, to very remote communities. In the case of Plateau, from what I've gathered, you know, a lot of these communities, you know, are just vulnerable. They're like sitting ducks, you know, waiting for terrorists to come and ravage them. I think that we need to completely rethink our intelligence gathering mechanism. We need to involve the communities more and more, you know, in policing work. We need to make sure that we rise to the challenge of protecting the people, which is the primary responsibility of government. You know, I haven't seen a great sense of urgency in the way some of these killings are tackled, and it's very unfortunate to think that each and every day, you know, we hear only stories of tragedy in some of these states. You know, the killing in any killing in any part of the state within this country, it should be a concern to everyone.
You know, what's also concerning is what the military also says about that particular issue, that they are admitting that militiamen, there's a herder militiamen, which is what triggered this latest crisis. And for this to be going on for so long, it begs the question of whether or not we're not allowing things to just simmer only for them to be provoked by one thing or the other. What is missing in the area of communicating with the people? What is missing? What are we not saying? Because every time these things happen, people die. Yeah, we lose property, but more importantly, people die. People lose loved ones, they lose families, they lose fathers, mothers, children. These things need to stop. What should we be saying to our people?
What is very intriguing, Ayo, is that, you know, these terrorists and militants and bandits, so-called, you know, they come into these communities with such audacity. You know, they commit these crimes, they behead people, they rape women, sometimes in broad daylight, and sometimes they even take them away in motorcycles. It's astonishing to me that our military is somehow unable, you know, up till now, you know, to rise to those kind of things. I mean, in these days when people are using automation, people are using drones, you can see everywhere in this country by simply using drones. Okay. It's astonishing to me, frankly. Okay. So what I think we need to do is the military needs to completely rethink its methodology of gathering information, and if they want to deploy, you know, a special force, I think that would be good, because I know that in the US there are specific, you know, teams, you know, that are assigned to specific assignments, but we need to see results.
Yeah, thankfully they also made that promise that they're going to do, they have or are going to deploy special troops. But Chamberlain and my colleagues in Abuja have questions for you as well. Go ahead, guys.
Morning, Dr. Sam. I'm just taking you back to Rivers. So, given the back and forth that went on and how invested several people were, how easy or difficult do you think it is for them to heed to your appeal, to sheath their swords? Because don't you think that at some point that divide may show up? Who knows when?
Well, you know, that's part of what I've been saying. You know, the governor has been very, very clear that he's open to work with everyone. And my sense is that in a state of 6 million people, very progressive, open-minded people, Rivers people are one of the most cosmopolitan in Nigeria. We accept everyone, in Rivers State. So if we can do that to people who are not even from our state and who are residents in our state, we should be able to work together no matter what the ideological or political persuasions might be that are different. And I think the governor said the exact right tone yesterday when he accepted the verdict of the Supreme Court. So my own suggestion always is to say we should bring back the focus on development. As I said, we've had very embarrassing situation where Rivers State has been in the headlines for the wrong reasons for too long. The toxicity and bellicosity of our politics is embarrassing to every right-thinking Rivers person, both in the homeland and in the diaspora. And now we have a unique opportunity to work with the governor to make sure that we bring development to our people. I can't help but refer to the governor's developmental agenda. I have been in government. I've seen I've seen a lot of these things at close range, but I can tell you that the vision that the governor has put on the table is so robust that he can't even do it alone. We need everyone, at this point in time to put, differences aside, and work with the governor. We have 6 million people to answer to. We have a lot of hundreds of thousands of children who are in school that we need to make sure that the government means something to them. Pensions had not been paid for so many years, and I think the governor has made a commitment to go back to some of these areas and try to lift the people out of poverty. If you look at the budget I keep referring to, for the first time in about 10 years, the governor has increased the budget for education by 57%. It was never the case. So this is a clear indication that the governor has his heart in the right place, and he wants to make sure he brings change on a sector-by-sector basis. He can't do it alone. No single person, however gifted, can do that alone. So my suggestion and appeal is that let everyone come together and try to support the governor to achieve these things for our people.
Let me just bring in this other matter as a communication professional, because people tend to sometimes underestimate the importance of proper communication. This decision that the CBN and FAN appear to be taking for some of their units to be relocated to Lagos seems to be attracting all sorts of commentary. Do you think it was handled properly?
Well, I've been following the needless controversy. I say needless because, the movement of one department or the other from one location of the country to another shouldn't be a matter for controversy. As I said to Ayo here a few minutes ago, I lived in South Africa for a long time, nearly a decade. The seat of government, the administrative seat of government is in Pretoria, but I lived in Cape Town where the legislature had its headquarters. So, we need to have this sense of disaggregation of government locations. So the most important thing is whether we carry the people along and whether we communicate the intentions very clearly. My own suspicion, about this so-called controversy about relocating some departments of the CBN to Lagos is that we still think in this primal, this sectional way, in this country. What we should be thinking about is, will the CBN be more nimble? Will it be more agile? Will it be more responsive to the needs of the economy? That should be the most important concern, not the location where you work from. CBN is a federal concern. It has branches all over the country. I remember there's a CBN office in Lagos, and I suspect there are CBN staff there. So anywhere you are posted to, you should be able to work. So long as it's within the borders of this country. So I think some of these things are not necessary. In fact, I think that the logic of relocation of some of these departments should go as far as different sectors. We've seen in the oil and gas sector where there is so much detachment, from the region where the oil and gas is actually produced. We have now a situation where decisions are made about oil and gas far away from the actual locations of these resources. So maybe this is the time for policymakers to see whether those who decide, who are key players on a sector by sector basis, should move closer and closer to the sources of raw materials and sources of major activities. So I fully support the relocation of relevant departments to other parts of the country, not just Lagos.
Interesting perspective there, but so many other things to discuss. But now that we've touched on communication, I guess we'll take it on some other time. Dr. Austin Tam George, former Commissioner for Information in Rivers State, as well as an alumnus of Harvard Kennedy School of Government. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for inviting me.